the biggest benefits of CRO is that you get to understand your customers in a way that you've never done before. I'm not a coder. That's not my background, but I've been able to build apps that I frankly should not be able to build because it's not my skill set, and all with the help of AI. I think the way that we work in CRO and experimentation will change radically.
Welcome to another episode of Click to Buy. I'm your host, Becca, and in today's episode, we're going to be speaking with Johann about topics such as AI and CRO and how to know when it's the right time for CRO with your business. So, welcome to the show. So happy to have you.
Becca, good to talk to you again. Thanks for having me.
Absolutely. So, for those people who don't know you in the audience, I would love it if you could give us a little few seconds about yourself, who it is, and what it is that you do.
I'm CEO of AWA Digital. It's a CRO agency based in the UK with an office in South Africa, where you, as you might hear from the accent, I'm from. And the agency's been around for a long time. I believe it was one of the first CRO specialist agencies. And you might see from the gray here, that's not actually dye. That's original, authentic. I've been around for a long time as well, and started doing CRO 15 years ago, more or less. So been in the trenches for a while.
Nice. So we have a lot of experience we can pull from today, which we like.
Well, the interesting thing is that I'm a practitioner, right? So this is what I've been doing for a long time. And then I've only become CEO of the agency about a year ago. And then so now I do governance and taxes and speak to lawyers and speak to accountants. So yeah, I'm afraid my recent experience, what I can talk a lot about, and I'm sure we will,
Yeah.
is AI. I'm absolutely obsessed with that.
Oh, absolutely. Maybe we can kick that off with a little bit of a hot topic. So it's definitely been kind of like a buzzword right now, but I think your opinion is probably that it's more than that. Also, some articles that I've seen. So I'm really curious to hear kind of your take on this. What is the potential for AI in CRO?
There's a lot to say there,
Yeah.
and there are all these thoughts running around my head now, and I need to pick the right ones. Let's start here. The
Yeah.
potential is huge, and I'll give you a different answer every time you speak to me because it's developing so fast. Every morning there's 5, 10 new tools, but we'll keep it high level. We keep it at an abstract level. Talk about AI and LLMs in general. In CRO, I think there are so many tasks in experimentation and CRO that AI lends itself perfectly to doing those tasks and doing them well. So copy, developing, writing code, analysis, ideation. And so if you think about CRO and experimentation and what goes into the process, all those things that I've just mentioned, AI is at the very least a fantastic co-pilot for a practitioner. And one of the ways I like to think of it is if you imagine this bell curve that we're all very familiar with in the industry, then and you think about skills in any of those areas. So whether it be analysis or development or whatever your thing is, copy, the distribution of skills along that bell curve. In the middle is the average. And suddenly what AI helps you to do is if you're on the left of that bell curve, it moves you towards the average. So suddenly you're an average developer, even if you weren't able to code a line 2-3 months ago. And if you're average, it moves you across to the right. And now the question, of course, is if you're on the right, if you're on the far right of that spectrum, what does AI do then? I think it puts you on steroids. I'm not one of those people who's intimidated by it. I'm excited by it. I don't think it's hype. Again, the gray hair here. I'm old enough to remember when the internet became a thing. So the one day it wasn't there, the next day it was there. And I just come out of university when the internet sort of became mainstream. And mainstream meaning that a few people had them and the newspapers and magazines were writing about them. And I remember these headlines in magazines like Business Week and the Guardian newspaper and, saying this is hype. People are never going to buy online. This thing is
Yeah.
over. And it's the same with AI today. I think this, I'm happy in if in 5 years from now, you turn around and laugh at me because I got it so wrong. I'd rather have that than in 5 years from now, I dismissed it
Yeah.
and it turned out to be a platform shift, which I think it will be. But and here's the last thought,
Hmm.
because as I say, there is a lot to say about this. So there's the practical aspect of AI, and I've been really surprised and amazed at practically what it's allowed me to do and
Hmm.
the agencies to do. In some cases, just doing faster, better, or more efficiently what you were able to do a while ago.
Mm.
But in some cases, being able to do things that you were never able to do before. So I've built apps. I'm not a coder. That's not my background. But I've been able to
Hmm.
build apps that I frankly should not be able to build because it's not my skill set, and all with the help of AI. I've seen people do analysis with reasonably advanced Python. They don't have a Python background. Um, and so that's the one part of it, is the practical sort of application. But I think it's
Hmm.
far more fundamental than that. What I believe will happen, and this is the bit in 5 years from now, you can laugh at me if I was wrong. I think it's a
Okay.
platform shift. I think the
Hmm.
world will change. I think the way that we work in CRO and experimentation will change radically, fundamentally. I think the way we approach it, the way we work with machines, what we do, what machines do, and even the way that we, our mental models about, say, for example, e-commerce. At the
Hmm.
moment, the way e-commerce works is the way that it worked back in the 90s, late 90s, early 2000s. It's still that same model. People come to the search engine, Google, they find the product, they click through, they land on a product page or wherever, and then they go through this funnel. And it's actually, the process is painful if you think about it. It's if you
Hmm.
landed on Earth from another planet and you try to buy something online, you would go, but that is this all you got? This isn't smooth. It's and so that entire mental model is up for disruption, and that's just one example. I think the way we work in uh, business, in agencies, on the other side of the table, I think we're in for interesting times, and I'm really excited by that.
Yeah, thank you. That was quite an interesting. I like how you said in some cases, kind of like this superpower that just elevates kind of what was already inside you, maybe skill wise. But in other cases, it's opening up completely new doors to new opportunities for things you'd never thought you would be able to do. So, super curious if you have any recommendations for like tools or like apps or things you've been testing out that maybe we can drop in the show notes for anyone who wants to test it out.
I'll keep it really simple. So I think
Uh-huh.
there are so many tools, and
Yeah.
um, I, as I say, every day that I wake up, there's 10 new tools that look interesting.
Hmm.
The, what I've been doing and limiting myself to is the foundation model. So like OpenAI, so everyone knows
Hmm.
ChatGPT, and
Sure.
ChatGPT has become far more interesting than it used to be. So I wasn't that enamored with ChatGPT until things like Code Interpreter and the plugins came along.
Hmm.
So that makes ChatGPT for me an interesting proposition. It's just Code Interpreter; it will change your life if you haven't played with it yet. Um, so that's where, just to give you one example of what it can do, you can stick an Excel into it or CSV, um,
Hmm.
and without telling ChatGPT what it is, you ask it to do some analysis on this file, and it'll spit out analysis, and um, then you can visualize it, and it'll write the code for you to do the analysis. So,
Hmm.
but OpenAI, the company behind it,
Hmm.
there's the API, which is what I mainly use to build applications around and to query
Gotcha.
documents. So
Hmm.
it's two that I want to mention. That's the one is OpenAI API, and the other one is Claude. Claude 2.0 is,
Hmm.
and maybe by the time this is, it's evolved,
Yeah.
is really good, especially for if you've got huge documents. It's got the biggest context window at the time where we're recording this, I think 100K. And so what that means is you can stick a book into it and then talk to that book.
Hmm.
And the practical applications of that is just enormous. So I would say those two, um,
Hmm.
but go beyond ChatGPT. Go um, use code interpreter, use the plugins, familiarize yourself with what plugins are available, and then if you have the time and the skills, play with the APIs. And maybe I'll give you just one practical example of how
Hmm.
I use that. And again, there are so many. So I've got Google Drive folders and Dropbox folders, and in one, um, here's one that I did yesterday, so it's fresh in my mind. I've got a Google Drive folder with um, disk profiles of the entire team. So my disk profile and everyone else, and
Interesting.
we've all got access to this. And I view those profiles, it's psychological profiles. It's like
Hmm.
a user's manual to working with me or my colleagues. So I've connected the API to that folder, and I can chat with it, and I can say, okay, I'm about to speak to David. How do I communicate with David? How because the way
Hmm.
I communicate is not necessarily the way he communicates. And so just remind me what is, what how do I make this work? Well, there's a new employee that's just come in. Um, just give me some tips how to conduct
Hmm.
my one-on-one. And it's a quick question. I don't have to read the document. I don't have to find. The AI will just answer me in natural language. And so that's one practical application, but um, there's so many. One more,
Yeah.
if you'll allow me. You can
Oh,
edit this
sure,
out.
go for it. No, it's
one of the
already
first
super interesting.
one of the first things I built, and this is one of those examples of applications that I should not have been able to build. Is
Hmm.
I've got what Tiago Forte will call a second brain, this knowledge base with
Hmm.
more than 10 years worth of notes, personal notes, meeting notes, Kindle highlights,
Hmm.
podcast transcripts that I've saved, web articles that I've saved. It's a huge volume of content, and so I built, and this was before GPT-4 was around, so it's still built on
Hmm.
GPT-3, um, a bot that allows me to talk to those notes and that allows me to find the dots that I can't find
Mm.
and then connect those dots. So it's connecting dots where I didn't even know the dots existed. Um, and it's become one of my highest ROI activities now is feeding this second brain, feeding this content machine,
Mhm,
this knowledge database, because suddenly I'm able to mine it. Before it was just a repository of knowledge, and I'd go in there and I'd look for stuff and I'd find it, and it'd be interesting to kind of reflect on what I'd saved years ago. But now it's become something that's part of my daily life.
that's so interesting. Both of those examples, especially how, of course, you gave like a practical example with like the disk, but just the potential for AI in understanding like kind of how humans work and how you can approach them in certain ways. Like that sort of application could be extremely helpful when you're trying to market or improve the customer experience. If you would have some data about kind of who your customers are and what they like I think that's first of all super interesting. And the second example as well, as you said, kind of connecting the dots. I'm sure over time, kind of that ability to not only yourself think about it, but I think we're crazy busy as humans. We have a lot of things on our mind. We can't possibly remember every little thing. So, very good examples and very interesting for anyone out there who might be interested in exploring the potential of AI. And we'll remember this episode. So, 5 years from now, we'll take a look
You
back
can
and
laugh at me.
see.
Yeah.
We'll either laugh at you or we'll have this clip and we'll be like, this was the moment. He called it here. So
Becca,
we'll see how it goes.
Becca, just to your point there quickly, I think
Yeah,
that
yeah.
every CRO or experimentation team, whether it's in an organization or in an agency environment, should
Hmm.
do at least the following:
Hmm.
have
Great.
a folder, some repository where you've got all your information, all the insights you've got about your customers, all the data you've got. In a protected environment, so you don't want to stick this out there on the internet. Of course, there's
Hmm.
that's something else we can talk about, but there are ways to ring fence it. And uh, let's just get this out there as well. You apply when you work with AI. Apply the usual standards that you would when you do any data analysis. There's no PII. I
Hmm.
mean, don't be stupid. Don't put stuff on the internet
Yeah.
that's sensitive information, that's personal, identifiable information that becomes available. But that's an entirely different topic. All I
Hmm.
want to say now is that there are ways to protect it. But then, if you've got this folder, think of it as a folder where you've got
Hmm.
everything that you know about your company, um, the customers, you've got financial reports in there. You've got
Hmm.
and then querying that with AI, it becomes enormously valuable. So I think for in a CRO and experimentation context, that's the very least that you should be doing.
Absolutely. Well, kind of switching to a different subject, but on the same line of thought. So, you've mentioned that you've been a practitioner and now you're kind of on the other side of the table helping to lead businesses. So, I'd love to know, in your experience, how can businesses tell when they're ready for CRO? Like, when's the right time?
Um, it isn't an easy answer. I think
Yeah.
you'll find you'll and this does come from experience on the other side of the table. So
Hmm.
so I've run a business where before I was in the agency, I worked in e-commerce, and actually that's how I discovered CRO. Is that um, I was responsible for growth in e-commerce, and I, we had big money. I was in a corporate, and we had deep pockets, and I was throwing money at agencies and at consultants, and nothing was happening.
Hmm.
We just didn't get the growth. And almost out of desperation, I started phoning customers and speaking to customers, and I had no clue what I was doing.
Hmm.
Um, I, I just wanted to step into their heads, and then we started um, implementing some of the insights that we got from customers, and that worked. So and one of the answers that you'll hear often is you've
Hmm.
got to have 50,000 users or 50,000. I don't think of it in those terms. I think that when it, it, CRO experimentation is just one um, tool, one aspect of running a business. So if you want to keep it very simple, there's the acquisition, there's converting, there's retention, at a very simple level. And initially, when you start, of course, you're going to focus on acquisition. And CRO, I would say that experimentation is part of that. So experimentation
Hmm.
with, um, running experiments, trying to, for example, validate your idea. Experimentation comes in there, but you're nowhere near ready for CRO. You're nowhere near ready for optimizing what's already there because there isn't anything to optimize. And the
True.
thing that you've got to obsess about at that point is finding your first customer, is finding product market
Hmm.
fit. And once you've found your first customer, is then you, building on that and understanding the world of the customer, understanding the need, pivoting. And it's going to be a while before you've got a basic system in place, a basic business in place where you have something to optimize. I've been on calls, sales calls,
Hmm.
with business owners where I've said to them, now is not going to be the right time. I could take your money, but this is not going to end well. You're
Hmm.
not going to spend your money well by investing in CRO right now. Get your business to a point where this is the right thing to do. And the the biggest mistake
Hmm.
that I think a business can make in answer to your question is to look at CRO as a quick fix. as a
Mm,
band-aid that you put on a gun wound or something like that. And I've seen that
yeah.
before as well. That doesn't end well. It's, this is not magic. What it is small incremental uplifts that build up over time. It's a way of making decisions so that I think the best way to think about CRO and experimentation in general, perhaps, is that your results at the end of the financial year, your
Hmm.
performance, is the outcome of every decision you make today, tomorrow, next week, and so on. And so the more good decisions you can make, the better your results will be. And
Hmm.
the opposite is also true. And experimentation and CRO is a way to help you to make better decisions and to make more better decisions than you make bad decisions. You will still make those bad decisions, but it's a way for you to find the things, surface the things that have a better chance of giving you a positive result than a negative result. And that's all it is. It's a better chance. It's not guaranteed. So it works really well if the business is healthy
Hmm.
and if there is product market fit, if you have a product or products that customers love, if you have customers that are familiar with a brand or have a way of becoming familiar with a brand, and if you have a good experience. And if any of those things are not in place, I would say fix that before you start thinking about CRO. And I know, I know this is controversial. I know that my colleagues in the industry will slaughter me for this, but that's my view.
That's all right. That's what we asked for, and I appreciate it, especially how I think you made a really good point. When you're get starting with CRO, you can't even get started until you have customers that you know really well that fit your product. And once you have that, that's when there's actually something out there to optimize or build upon. So I
And of
think it's
course, CRO
uh-huh.
is going to help you
Yeah.
understand your customers. I mean, I
Oh,
think
of course. Yes.
that's one of the biggest benefits of CRO is that you get to understand your customers in a way that you've never done before. And it's one other way
Hmm.
to think about CRO is that it's you understand the world of your customer, and then you formulate theories about how to improve the world of your customer, and then
Hmm.
you test those theories, right? And I think the outcome of that, of doing that well, and I didn't say anything there about business or KPIs or
Hmm.
this is not about you. It's not about your revenue. It's not about your
Hmm.
conversion rate. It is about your customer, understanding them and finding ways to improve their life. And you'll be rewarded for that in terms of dollars, pounds, and conversion rate.
I love that. Thank you. I think that's really powerful. So anyone out there who's listening in, I really think like keep that to heart because that's where it all gets started. Kind of jumping onto another topic. So of course, this podcast is sponsored by Instant, which is a landing page builder on Shopify. So I was very curious in a previous conversation you and I had about landing pages. You said something that stuck with me. You said landing pages are like a sales conversation. So I would really love to hear you kind of explain what you mean by that.
Um, I think that there's this temptation, and it's very easy to look at a
Hmm.
website or a mobile app as this flat structure, two-dimensional. You've got a page with a header or a menu, and you've
Hmm.
got images and text and buttons, call to action, and all these things, and a hierarchy of information, and you can move stuff around the page. And I'm afraid that's often what CRO is
Mm.
just moving stuff around the page. Um, and that's because you're looking at as this collection of constellation of stuff, elements. But uh, I think another way to look at it is it's a sales conversation. So forget about those elements.
Hmm.
Why is somebody on your page? If you're an e-commerce site, if you're a Shopify site, presumably somebody's going to be there because they're just kicking tires, or they landed on the wrong site, or they're doing research, they're from a competitor, forget them. But the prospects,
Mm-hmm.
presumably they're there because they have a need that they suspect your product might be able to address. And then they have questions about that. They're thinking about their need, not in those terms, but they're thinking about how this might work in their life, the product that they're looking at. Is
Mm-hmm.
this the right thing? Maybe they are aware of some alternatives, and they in their mind, without even consciously thinking about it, they're making these comparisons, and they've got all these questions. And if they were in a shop, in a physical shop, they'd browse, they'd pick it up, they'd feel the weight, they'd turn it around, they'd read the
Mm-hmm.
instructions, or they'd speak to the shop assistant, and that same process is playing out on your website. And so there's this constant sales conversation going on, and they've got questions, they've got fears, they've got concerns, they've got comparisons that they're busy making. And your the way I look at optimization is to optimize what is in the mind. So that sales
Mm-hmm.
conversation, as opposed to just moving stuff around the page. Of course, the way it plays out is by effectively moving stuff around the page. But it's not
Yeah.
about, for example, you go on Twitter and you find these Twitter bros talking about, move the CTA above the fold. And that's bullshit. What happens when you move the CTA above the fold? You'll get more clicks on it.
Mm-hmm.
Do you get more sales? The fact that somebody is now clicking on something because it's more visible doesn't make them more inclined to buy your stuff if it's not
True.
the right thing for them to buy. So, um, that's an example of moving stuff around the page, as opposed to, really thinking about what happens in the mind of the consumer. And again, that's why it's so important to really think about, those three things that I mentioned earlier: understand the world of the
Mm-hmm.
consumer, and then formulate theories about how you can improve their life. And that will give you the answer about what you should be testing.
Yeah, thanks. I think that it's quite interesting how you frame that, and I think it makes a lot of sense. It's not just about getting someone to take an action because something is more visible, but are they taking that action because it's like the next logical step in understanding if this is the right fit for whatever it is that they were looking for? I actually took a course recently about like writing copy for landing pages, which I love as a content marketer. And I think they described this concept called like the slippery slope, about how it's more about just making sure every single element that you have is naturally leading into that next concern or that next question or the next curiosity that your prospect has. So I think this metaphor you have is kind of looking at a landing page as a sales conversation is a great mindset for someone who's maybe making some of their first pages for their store and not sure where to start. It's not just about listening to, okay, you should have this best practice here, but try to get to know your customer and like what is it that they're actually needing to know.
Best practices are bullshit. Best practices, whose best practices are they? It's
Yeah.
um, anyone who's done enough A/B testing will know that best practices don't exist. You
Mm-hmm.
Something works on one site, it doesn't work on another. We've even had examples of reasonably similar verticals within one company where
Really?
it doesn't work. The one tactic works on the one site but not on the sister site. um, Best practices, I would say, where perhaps they are useful, and I'm not even sure about that,
Mm-hmm.
is when you're first starting out and you want to put a good baseline there, a good
True.
foundation. You want to start with a good foundation. But then even whose best practice are you looking at in that
True.
case?
Yeah.
So I completely dismiss best practices.
Nice. I think that was going to be my next question. So thank you, because that's something I've been asking almost every guest on the show, because there's definitely, I think, similar advice to what you have. Maybe when you're starting, if you don't really have anything else to work with, it can be a good kind of guide rail to get started with, but you really have to test it to see like what works with your customers. We had, for an example, someone who mentioned that they had two sites from also like the same customer, and social proof actually seemed to decrease conversions for one of their products, because then their assumption was, oh, people are concerned because why would you need social proof for something that should be like such an easy buy? So I'm really curious if you have any examples of something like this from your previous work as a practitioner, where something really didn't go as expected.
That's a good one, actually. Social proof. So we've had that as well. Um, Another one is that jumps to mind is guarantee. So that would be
Mm,
a classic best practice is offer a guarantee, and the more compelling that guarantee can be, the better it will be for your business. We had one
mm-hmm.
where the guarantee was already there. It was pretty good. I think 90 days or whatever it was,
Yeah.
pretty decent guarantee, and made it more visible. So the hypothesis was, because it's such a strong guarantee, put it in your face. And this was a gifting shop, and it it was negative, actually, not by a huge amount, but it certainly wasn't positive. And then we did some more analysis and research to understand why that's the case. And it turned out that one of the most dominant personas on this site
Mm-hmm.
was grandparents buying gifts for their grandchildren. And so you've got a grandpa on the site buying
Mm-hmm.
something for his 9-year-old or whatever grandchild, looking at this guarantee and thinking suddenly, oh my goodness, what if this thing doesn't work out? What if they want to send it back?
Mm-hmm.
So suddenly you
Yeah.
prime them to have this concern, and so it actually works against you. So that would be one example where the problem with
Yeah.
with best practices. I think there are many problems with it, but it's
Mm-hmm.
one, it is too tactical. So it's throwing stuff against the wall to see what sticks,
Mm-hmm.
and something will stick. Inevitably, it's got you, but there's no strategy behind it. You don't know what you're doing. You don't know why you're doing it, and so you don't learn anything. You happen to
Mm-hmm.
get 1% here, 3% there, and you'll get some wins. But also, what's the opportunity cost? So
Mm-hmm.
you taking up those testing slots, you're taking up your team's time, you're taking up your all these resources are being consumed throwing shit against the wall to see what sticks. It just isn't the the wise way to go about this.
Yeah, well, thank you. That was a quite interesting example as well. I love how you talked about kind of the persona behind it as well, that kind of helped you to understand maybe why this didn't work as you had hypothesized. Kind of leading on maybe, I have a guess maybe as to what your answer will be from our conversation already, but what do you think most businesses get wrong when it comes to their customer journey?
They don't understand the customer. They think they
Okay.
understand the customer, but they don't. They have no clue. Um, they or they we sit around. Steve Blank,
Hmm.
this is also back in 2000. He was a Stanford professor, wrote the book, 4 Steps to Epiphany, I think it was called. And he had this
Hmm.
phrase, get the hell out of the building. The answers are not in the building. And really what he meant
Hmm.
is, don't sit around the boardroom table and make assumptions. Speak to people. And I think
Hmm.
that still happens. It still happens a lot. I see it. I see it. I'm surprised where I see this, but people think they know their customers. They don't. That's the one thing. The second thing is,
Hmm.
we spoke about personas a moment ago. Whatever you call them, whether you call them personas or something else, you've
Hmm.
got different segments, let's call them, different archetypes of customers. Not every customer is the same. And you've got to
Hmm.
figure out what those are in your business. You've got to understand their needs. You've got to understand their why they are interested in your service or your product. And that's the starting point for all of this. But only then can you start thinking about the customer journey and the entire customer journey. I think that's maybe one of the other blind spots in CRO, quite common. It is so focused
Hmm.
on a page or a funnel that you forget the broader context, which is so important. Where do people come from? Why are they even there? And what's again, it goes back to the mind. What's going on in their mind?
Hmm.
What's their intent? And after you've converted them, what then? What does the rest of the journey look like? So if we manage to convert more people on your site, but logistics are have so many cracks in the wall that
Hmm.
it's a bad experience, then, well, again, fix that first before you start doing more CRO. Get the basics in place. So I'd say it's those two things. You don't understand your
Yeah.
customer, even if you think you do, and you don't take a broad enough context.
And kind of along those lines, I actually have a question from a previous guest. And his perspective is that because we use the term CRO, some people don't really understand the full scope of what CRO and experimentation is and all of the possibilities. They only understand like this one small part of the puzzle. So if we had the opportunity to rebrand CRO right now and use a different kind of word for it, do you have a term that you think could encapsulate maybe this entire experimentation mindset, process, field, whatever you want to call it? Like, this is your chance to rebrand CRO. What would you pick as a new term?
I won't even try.
Wouldn't even
Um,
try.
yeah, there's this. I agree with the guest, whoever said
Hmm.
that the term is unfortunate, and there are many reasons for
Hmm.
that. And there's a constant debate going on in the industry, and nobody in the industry likes the term, or
Hmm.
very few do, and we all know the reasons why. And so there are
Hmm.
all these proposals about what to call it. Um, I I'd rather obsess over something else.
Hmm.
I think it's I think we dislike the term. I think we know why we dislike the term. It is what it is, and as long as you don't take the term too literal, so as long as you don't
Yeah.
get sucked into that narrow focus on one metric, conversion rate, and whatever comes with it, call it whatever you want.
Hmm. Nice. I think the previous guest Johnny would probably agree with you because he said he also makes like a lot of posts about this where it's kind of like this is the term and we're stuck with it. Wish we had something better. If somebody comes up with the better name, that will be great. But for now, hopefully we can all get on the same page about what it really means to everyone who's a practitioner or interested in trying to use more experimentation in their business. So I have one last question for you. We're going to have another guest on soon, and I'd love to know if you have a question that I could pass along to them.
I would like to know how, if you're a new business, and
Hmm.
if you've got if you don't even have a site yet,
Hmm.
but you want to do something with Shopify, how do you find your niche? How do you find that? Because everything's been done, right? Everything's already
Hmm.
being sold. So how do you come up with the next um, niche that you can make a success of? Where do you get your ideas?
Excellent. Well, I will pass that along and let you know what he says. Well, it has been a pleasure having you on the show today. Thank you so much for your time. We're so happy to have you. And again, where can people reach you if maybe they're interested in learning more about your hot takes on AI and CRO, or maybe some of your conversion or experimentation tips? Where would be the best place to look?
I'm reasonably active on both LinkedIn and Twitter.
All right.
Now X.
Oh yes, now
Yeah,
X.
yeah.
So that's where you can find him. Again, this has been Becca, and see you in our next episode of Click to Buy.